You know, the world has economic recessions on average every 7 to 8 years since World War II, and we get used to the boom and bust cycles. But we've not seen a geopolitical recession since 1945. We're in one now. We focused on globalization for decades now. We focused on connectivity for decades. Now we focus on their discontents, and we focus on a world order that's starting to come apart without anyone knowing what comes next. From that perspective, 2017 is an unprecedentedly volatile political risk environment. With that, we should look at the top risks.
So Ian, South Africa is going to really get hit hard by elite conflict and by elite struggles next year. That's going to hurt the economy, and that's going to impair South Africa's ability to step in to a whole set of regional crises that are likely to erupt.
South Africa, the most important regional hegemon in Africa, and countries like Mozambique, a lot of instability, DRC, Kabila holding on, lots of violence. South Africa's really needed this year. They're not going to be anywhere to be seen.
It's going to be a rough year for Southern Africa and for South Africa.
North Korea, 20 nuclear weapons, developing their ICBM capabilities as well. Everyone considers that to be a technological red line. But unlike Obama, unlike Bush, you know, Trump's going to be pushing the Chinese to move unilaterally on them.
And the Chinese aren't going to like it. More sanctions they're not going to like. Could be a source of split between the U.S. and China.
The markets generally see North Korea mouths off, and then it sort of quiets down almost immediately. And this is a year when actually structurally it's going to lead to tougher relations between all the major powers.
I think that's true, and we're also coming to a moment of truth. North Korea is getting close to an ICBM capability, close to a miniaturization of a nuclear weapon capability. Could be payday for North Korea. So Ian, Turkey again this year is going to be plagued by Erdogan consolidating power. He's going to hold a referendum in April. He's going to win. And that is just going to exacerbate political, economic, and security risks that Turkey faces.
I think Turkey is, in some ways, the biggest underperformer as a global emerging market in terms of political risk. Erdogan really wants to be Putin, but he's not. And so even though he's able to consolidate through an executive presidency, once he wins, once he becomes executive president, he's not going to start behaving as legitimized. He still is going to be an insecure leader. Silicon Valley for him is going to be real and a problem, both in terms of control over new media as well as national security. And virtually none of those guys actually supported Trump when it came to the election.
That's right. It's not his constituency. And Silicon Valley are the ones that bring us automation, robots, to take away jobs. He's all about jobs.
And the fact that the political orientation of Silicon Valley is itself much more libertarian. It's get the government out of my hair, where Trump really wants patriotic corporations and he wants a patriotic media. That's where those two things come together. The opposition to that is, really dead on in Silicon Valley. They're coming to blows in 2017.
Central banks in developed markets this year could well become politicized. Donald Trump doesn't like the Fed. He is going to pursue an expansionist fiscal program that could create inflation. The Fed could raise rates. We could get into a wicked cycle between the White House and the Fed.
Well, and by the end of the year, when Yellen's getting out, clearly Trump is going to be oriented towards putting in his own person that's going to make the Fed look like a much less independent beast.
Politicization of central banks will also hit Europe. The European Central Bank has always stepped in to save floundering economies. Political consensus for that is gone this year. If a country fails, the ECB is not going to be there.
Technology is helping a lot of people around the world, but in the Middle East, it's making most things worse. And this is how they lost the model for creating economic wealth. It's the energy revolution in the States. And it's also increasingly a serious problem in terms of their ability to maintain legitimacy. They need to have a level of privacy in these countries.
These global trends are really explosive in the Middle East. Connectivity allows people who aren't happy to get together. Forced transparency, WikiLeaks. If it hits a Middle Eastern country, these authoritarian rulers are going to have a hell of a lot of explaining to do.
It's funny, the rise of populism, everyone's talking about it as if it's a European problem or an American problem. It's really hitting the Middle East, and this has nowhere to go but down, and technology is really driving that.
It's going to make a bad situation that much worse. This is going to be a tough year for structural reform. There is a bunch of countries that think they've done enough. They don't want to do more. They're going to rest on their laurels. There's another set that are waiting for a major political event and an election, and they're not going to reform until after that.
And then you have some that are just hopeless causes. They don't have the political capital to get anything done. And finally, you have some that recognize that there are really big structural changes that need to occur, and they can't do enough. I'm thinking, you know, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria. I mean, everyone's kind of hoping that emerging markets have to get things done, and yet no one's going to know where to put their money. And the one thing the world's been able to count on after the 2008 financial crisis was that Merkel was out there as a strong leader of Europe. And this is the year that really goes away, not only because of her own election, though she'll likely win, but also because no one in Europe wants to follow her anymore. The crises have gotten too large.
There is going to be much less of a crisis prevention ability, much less coordination within Europe. The Queen of Europe no longer has the power she had.
Well, and even though she's the one person that we can feel comfortable is actually going to succeed in re-election, Germany doesn't have the same populist problems on the economy they do on identity issues that other European countries do. But ultimately, between a U.S.-Russia relationship that's going to be much improved and Trump that has no love lost for Merkel, let's do values together, this is going to be a much more challenging time for a Europe that really needs a leader.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is going to be focused on consolidating power this year. That's going to make him extremely sensitive to any internal or external issue which could make him look weak.
Look, with Trump coming in, who wants to put some points on the board in his deal-making expertise and also has no love for China, the worst possible time you could be pushing these guys because, of course, Xi can't show weakness in the run-up to his leadership transition in the fall.
And this overreaction could also rear its head in the economic sphere. If he sees economic turmoil ahead, he could take steps that he doesn't need to take, causing volatility throughout global markets.
World's second largest economy, most important bilateral relationship. Watch it very carefully in 2017. You know, you never would have guessed that the top risk was going to be the United States. That was a big surprise from last year, but the fact is the United States no longer wants to have a leadership role globally. They're focusing unilaterally on values, on trade, and on security structure. And of course, that's going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of American allies.
The international system, as we know it, free trade, Trump's opposed to that. China, Xi Jinping sees Trump's election as a huge opportunity to run around the region.
At home, Trump is actually not that great of an impact. I mean, if anything, it's pro-growth. But internationally, the fact that the country that has been the linchpin of the global order since World War II is no longer available for service, that is absolutely the top risk
We've
in
come
the
full
world
circle
today.
since 1945.
Yes, we have.
Случай с Украиной.